Hello, this is Lee
Kelly.
and we are here to talk to you about change for the health of it. So you're in the right place if you are looking to grow, learn more about yourself, and create an awareness that allows you to reach your goals, whether they be in health or wellness. Like I said, I'm Lee and I am an ACE certified health coach. My passion is helping people heal their relationship with food and their relationship with movement to have healthy habits that let them be their happiest and their healthiest. And
And I'm Kelly. I am an IAN certified health coach and an esthetician, and I focus on healing your gut health by addressing emotional health and physical health, which in turn helps heal inflammatory skin conditions and hair conditions.
we're coming to you today because we want to talk about something that we know is incredibly impactful for our clients when they put it into practice in their daily life. And that is the creation of boundaries. And so this episode here, we're really going to dig into what they are, how they serve you, and how you can start looking in places to decide where maybe you need to set some boundaries to protect your peace. So to kick us off, Kelly.
Well,
What?
I'm going to pause because
Oh my goodness.
we made a promise last episode, so I think maybe
No,
if we introduce Barracuda before boundaries, because this episode might get a little bit heavy at times.
it's
So I
true.
feel like when it gets heavy, we can just go Barracuda
And just take a second. I love
and
that.
just
Love
take a
that.
second.
Yes, some
So,
people do deep breaths. So if you're looking for that, no, we do deep breathing too, but we also do chaotic gremlin stuff. And so now we're going to introduce you to that side of health and wellness, which I believe is very important for the spirit. So this is the Barracuda. So the best way to use this, I'm going to tell you right now. Since we're going to do it, let's do it right. The best way to use this is with someone that's incredibly aggressive. And you cannot, there's just no engagement with this person. You don't want to do anything stupid. You know it's not worth your time. But you also have that petty thing, just this much, where it's like, I also just don't want to walk away. I want, so great example. You get cut off. You don't want to flip someone off. That's not right. It's not right, right? But you could and then just kind of watch the confusion on their face. And so, incredible to see at a stoplight scenario where they passed you and you caught up, and now you're both sitting there and you're just like, and then you just go. That's it. Kelly nailed it. So sometimes, Kelly and I will do goofy stuff like this in our lives. And it's really just an example of even talking about the hard stuff. Like Kel said, you gotta laugh too,
yeah.
or the work just gets incredibly heavy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think anytime we need a break, we will just say Barracuda.
I love these.
And we'll take a little breather. Also, I have decided to dress for the weather that I'd like and drink from the cup for the weather that I would like. Salty hair, don't care.
Oh, I love
Because
that.
it
I
is,
actually told myself to wear wintry colors because I feel like left out of the experience. How
um,
hilarious.
don't feel left out. Don't feel left out. Okay, so hopping right into number one, what is a boundary?
Okay. So I really I really sat with this one for a while because
So
often
did I.
we could just
I was like,
Google it's a boundary, and I was
I
like,
was like, a boundary is a boundary. It
I
took
was
me
like,
days.
I was like, break it down. So I think a boundary is a way to communicate my needs that is centering the conversation on myself and why this ask is incredibly important for me feeling at peace or me feeling comfortable, rather than centering the conversation around feedback for another person. So I think
Mm.
a boundary is where you take an ask that you are offering to someone that you care about, and you want your relationship dynamic to remain as healthy and functional as possible, whether it be at work, in your love life, with friends. And so a boundary is what you say to them as, hey, I'm reaching across this line. I'm being vulnerable because your relationship with me is so important and I value it so much that it's actually worth it to me to tell you what my real need is. And it's focused on me. And I think we often struggle with this because it requires an insane amount of vulnerability when you think about like what that means you're doing, because you have to sit there and say, okay, I have to be honest with this person. I have to understand my own need well enough to be super clear about what I want. And then on top of it, like, let's just be clear. We could get rejected. No.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
like it's not easy. It's like not an easy thing to do. And before I jump into kind of like what I thought about in terms of like, so how do you kind of work around the fact that it's not easy? Like, what is your definition of what a boundary is?
So I think that that's spot on. I like the fact that you said it's, you reaching out and letting somebody know, like, hey, this is kind of where I stand. It is because I care about you. So I also sat with this for a very long time because I was like, a boundary is a boundary. It's a boundary. And I was like, but what really is a boundary? So I came up with a boundary is a standard that you're putting in place to protect your beliefs, um, and to be able to have healthy relationships. So shorter than yours, I feel like yours was very concise and to the point. And yeah,
No,
I
but we
think,
both focused on it's a way to protect the health of your relationships.
yeah,
And I think sometimes it gets like conflated with making demands. And it's not the same. It's you're
yes,
asking. You're not
yeah,
expecting.
right. And that person always has a choice. They have a
Yes.
choice whether or not they would like to respect your boundaries or they don't have to. But you're just letting them know this is where I stand. This is how I see us moving forward together healthily. Is that a word? Healthily?
It is
Healthfully?
now. Here we are.
It is now. Um, and they don't have to move forward with you. They can make the decision to go a separate way, but it's something that you hold fast to.
Absolutely. It's so kind of when I was thinking more about like, okay, so why is it harder to hold fast to them sometimes though? Right? Like what is it? And even when you're having the conversations, like I know for me it produces a lot of anxiety sometimes when I have to create a boundary. And so like digging into that, I think part of it is framing what the boundary is, but not just for the other person, like also framing boundaries to yourself.
Yeah.
And so when I thought about that, I thought with yourself, that you need to think about boundaries as you aren't making someone do something like we said. You're protecting the versions of you that in the past no one has protected.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that when you frame it like that to yourself, where it's not about control and it's not about power, it's not about winning, it's not about losing, it's about noticing when there's something important enough that your body and your brain are telling you this hurts and saying, in the past, I might not have known how to protect myself. I might not have had the means to protect myself. There are so many reasons that we might have struggled in the past to do that. But right now, I know I can set this boundary and I'm protecting myself now, but I'm honoring those versions as well. And then I think it's kind of like, so am I anxious enough that it's not worth honoring those versions of myself?
Yes. Let's take a barracuda right there.
I bet it's not. Like I just bet that it isn't. Um what do you think? Were you ready to dig into the difficulties?
Yeah, we can dig. We can definitely dig. But I do agree with you. I do think that, when you're first starting to set boundaries, or even when you're practiced, it
Yeah.
can be very anxiety provoking because, especially like you said, if you're looking back on past times when you've experienced this hurt over and over, it can feel very scary to stand up for yourself because of those past experiences and how it has gone, and your brain just is collecting that data again, where in the past this has happened. So all this anxiety that has built around this subject is there, and you have to say, okay, do I do it?
It's so true. I think like that's definitely something that we haven't mentioned that is absolutely tied to how you're navigating boundaries you're setting. And even when people try to set boundaries with you, if you find yourself responding like, no, like that's probably a sign that you've got something that's making you feel a little pain and a little
Some
fear. And
stuff.
there's some stuff there. There's some stuff, and we all have that. And so I think that's almost what's so beautiful about if in your relationship you're able to say like, let's try setting boundaries together, because that way you're both parties get equal protection in that dynamic, and both parties' histories are respected in that kind of dynamic and their needs as well. And I think as adults, feeling seen and valued in that specific way is something money can't buy. Like I think a lot of us are looking around and realizing like, huh, I thought it was the house and the picket fence and all this other stuff. I like we talked about that in goal setting. We had this laundry
Right.
list we thought was like the thing, and now it's like, nope.
But wouldn't it just be nice if they understood me and really felt what I was feeling or understood what I was feeling? I think
And
that's really powerful. Yeah. I think that's like the concrete basis, foundations of relationships, strong
yes,
relationships.
ones that are going to last, and like
Yeah.
ones that are going to be able to contribute to the health and beauty and happiness of your life. And like the people that surround you and your dynamics with them are ultimately impacting you on a daily basis, whether you choose to be aware of that or not. And
Yeah.
that is like a lesson uh, I've learned many a time. I'm sure you would agree. Like, it's just like, you know, we're going to keep marinating on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, we pushed it off a little bit, but Barracuda.
There we go.
Okay.
Guilty scandal.
Okay. I'll go first.
Brave. Brave and appreciated.
You got it. Okay. So our next question is what was our exact wording of it? So, what was a time you found it difficult to hold your boundaries? How did it feel and what were the results? So, I will hop right in. I'm going to work backwards a little bit to buy myself a little bit of time.
Freedom. God, it's real.
Okay. But at least I'm honest. I'm
Yes.
honest.
Sure.
Okay. So, in episode 1, when we were talking about setting goals or feeling behind, we talked about how there was this feeling of shame. And when I don't hold my boundaries, that is the exact feeling I get. I get this
Mhm.
feeling of shame because I haven't done my job to protect myself. Um, so I had also said in episode 1, I had made a choice to leave my home and leave a relationship that wasn't really serving me. I had held strong to my boundaries in that relationship on what I expected, like communication wise, what I expected, a loving relationship to look like, and what I expected from my partner. And those boundaries weren't respected or acknowledged. And so I left. And typically, when a big life event like this happens, I go to therapy, I process, you take some lessons, you apply it, you grow.
Yeah.
You grow. Um, so this time I didn't have health insurance, money was tight, and to be quite frank, I just wanted to numb.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was taking huge steps backwards. I had mentioned that this was the first time that I had to move in with roommates since I was 21. So I was feeling a lot of shame around that. And so I've rebounded. Yeah.
I just want to say how powerful it is for you to name that your desire came from, like, I don't want to be aware of this. This
Yeah.
pain that I am feeling and thinking, I do not want to be aware. I'm going to numb it, because
Yeah.
I do not think people recognize the amount we are doing this in our lives, whether it be with Netflix, drugs, alcohol, whatever your poison is. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to just highlight that because it was like such a powerful reflection from that. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
No, not at all. And, I was in such a weird headspace because I think I was 29. And it was, again, like doing the comparison game where it was like everybody else that's in around my age is either living with their significant other, they're like doing amazing things in their work life. And I was just really feeling less than, and I wanted to feel young, and I just wanted to not care. So I ended up rebounding into a relationship that was supposed to be fun and light, and it turned into something that was really toxic and abusive. And when the last incident happened, and I finally put my foot down and I called my parents and I was telling them what had happened, and I told them everything that had been going on. Um, I was proud of myself, but the amount of shame that I felt for allowing someone to treat me like that, allowing someone to so blatantly violate me and my boundaries, I was so ashamed. And it was really hard because the people that I did tell were saying, "You're so strong that you walked away." And I understand that. But at the same time, I didn't feel that way because I wasn't strong with holding my boundaries. And the first time that a red flag went up and, a joke was made, um, I was like, I could say something, I could not say something, and I'm going to go with not saying something because it's just easier. Um, but it really made me sit and reflect on what I thought of myself. And I had to answer some really, really hard questions around what I felt like I deserved and where did those thoughts and feelings stem from. And there were some brutal truths that I had to face. And I may have held past boundaries for the wrong reasons. And it was just a really good learning experience through therapy and self reflection, um, about learning how to forgive myself and to look at those past versions of myself and say, listen, we were just doing the best that we could with the tools that we had and what we believed. And I am so proud of the version of myself now. And we are going to continue working to make a beautiful life. But it was rough. It was definitely rough. And yes, there were some really great learning points. I always try and do like the silver lining, glass
Yeah.
half full. And there were some really great learning points. And I don't think that I would be where I am now had I not had to go through like that brutal, you need to sit down and you need to process. But that's that was one of the hardest times. And that was for me moving on now, it's like you hold your boundaries because I have this example of an extreme example, but I have this example of what happens when you don't.
No, I think that, I hear you kind of like giving past versions of yourself grace for being where they were at the time. And I think that's so important that we do that for ourselves because it's not easy to do. It's incredibly difficult when like the version of you now is like, wait, you were what? You let what you were
Yeah.
like the math doesn't math. Like you can't because you're a totally different person now. And I think if anything, that just kind of shows how much change we're capable of and how much growth we are capable of. And it's not necessarily that it was fair you had to pay that price or that it's even a silver lining. Like, because I get that. I can empathize with it being like, yeah, I've had enough pain where I really like don't need to be like stronger. I'm glad.
Do you see these muscles?
I'm so good. I'm so good. So it's like I don't need any more lessons, but at the same time, you're right. Like at the same time, it's also like, but they're probably going to come. And so, like, knowing how to protect yourself when you can, like with boundaries, is so important. And I guess it's my turn to sound because this is going to be. So, I want to start this with I'm going to start this with, I am someone now that if I feel dehydrated, like I see a little bit of like dry lip or I can feel it, I go to the store and get like a specific kind of water so I can feel my
Essentia.
yep. Or for instance, if I'm like, oh gosh, my bones are tired, I'm just feeling a little, then I'll go to bed at 6 p.m. So like I want to be so clear that now like I am the complete opposite of what I'm about to describe. I don't even know the year.
Which
Maybe
which I
20.
don't think you need to defend.
Oh
I
no, I say it more to show how much change can happen.
okay.
I say I because like this is before I would set boundaries, and now I will literally just say to work, friends, my husband, I'm going to bed. Like it doesn't matter what time of day it is. If I feel like my mind and body need rest, I'm in bed. If I feel like I need a certain type of water, I don't feel guilt about going to get that type of water. I go get that water. I don't. So what I'm trying to highlight. I'm glad you like pointed this out. What I'm trying to highlight is like you can be in whatever place you're in right now listening to this episode. And it is 1000% possible that with specific skill building, you can be in a completely different place when you look back on this time in your life.
Yes.
And boundaries is one of the key pieces of that. So here we go, a time where I didn't, and there were consequences. So many. I'm going to stick with work because I think that when working with clients, what I have found is that seems to be this like catch-all for people. Like, oh, I can't care about myself. I've got to work. And I love how passionate people are about their jobs. And I think back to this previous version of myself. I'm like, wow, look at you go, you little psycho. But I will tell you right now, if you want health and wellness, you will have to be able to look at your day and go, I can give myself a half hour of my own time. And that is just something you need to be accountable to. Like, enough. You do have time to eat lunch. You're choosing not to. But I'll get into my passions in a little. I'll tell you about how I screwed up first. So it's February, I believe, of 2015. Full disclosure, for this episode and all future episodes after the pandemic, years became nothing to me.
In post.
I try, but I'm like, nope, can't handle looking back that far. I'll put a number on it, 2015. And I'm pretty confident. I was so sick. I had just every inch of my body telling me, we need to go to the hospital. Stop. We need to go. I will tell you some symptoms. My eyes were yellow. I was so itchy. I had scratched myself to the point where I was covered in blue and purple bruises. I was throwing up every single day, multiple times a day. I was peeing bright yellow pee, like nothing you've ever seen unless your liver was failing. And I was ignoring all of it because it was IB testing and my kids needed to take their test and I had to proctor it. And in my head, I didn't think it was possible to just say no, which some of you might be sitting there like, what? And it's like, yeah, that's how deep we can get into this if we're ignoring what we need for ourselves. So I literally had kids bringing me bags of ice to cover my body while I kept testing. And like there were kids in rotation as like my ice people because that calmed the itching. And kind of like how Kelly described, I look back on this now and I am like utterly ashamed that this was my behavior because I'm like, you knew you had autoimmune disease. You knew you weren't taking the infusions you were supposed to get to see if you'd be okay. And that there was a very big likelihood you wouldn't be okay because the doctors were nervous that you were 2 weeks late with it. You knew, right? But I hadn't learned the skills to take care of myself. And I hadn't learned the skills of awareness to be able to check in with myself. And I hadn't learned how to set a boundary at work and say, I'm sick. I cannot do it. I believed I had to be the best educator I could be, and that meant sacrificing myself because I was taught that by every organization that trained me from the second that I landed in Florida as a 20-something-year-old. And so my liver failed. And by the time I did make it to the hospital, I was dying for the second time in my 20s. And I had to lay in that hospital bed and know that my passion, my inability to say I'm sick out of fear of being rejected and not seen as the best and not valued the most because I wasn't valuing myself, almost killed me. And you would think one organ failure would like be enough to like wake you up, but even after that, I still then sought to define myself through my career, and because of that, fell prey to forgetting about myself again. And so I think like the difficulty with boundaries at work is that you believe that this is going to make you less valuable in the eyes of your boss. You believe it could impact you monetarily. You believe XYZ thing. And at the end of the day, you cannot be successful and happy if you spend 65 to 70 years of your life putting corporations and bosses and other people's needs above yours. And it's not like there's a 10-year period and then it's like, oh, okay. Whoo, and you're guaranteed to be able to live. Like that's not, no one has made you any such promise. And so I learned that lesson the hard way, but now it makes me all the more passionate with my clients to like remind them that they get one body and that's it. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we're setting the boundaries we need to take care of ourselves and love ourselves like we deserve.
So there are a few things that I want to say there. First off, I'm going to barracuda you. Is Bubs with you? Is Bubs licking your other hand?
No, but it was Minnie, and then Minnie was on the stool. He's on the couch watching me angrily.
I feel like this is the therapy pet episode.
Literally.
Marilyn is also sitting with me. But the thing that I wanted to point out is I think you hit a very important point, is that we're all trying so hard to be the best. And, we're all willing to sacrifice. And I was chatting with my sister the other day, and she brought up two things that I think are fairly relevant to this. So a question that her therapist had asked her is, so what if you're not the best? So what if that is the truth? What if you are not the best? So then what? And I think that that's a really powerful question to ask, because then it kind of relieves you of some of that burden of, yeah, maybe I'm not the best. So what? What happened? Did the world blow up? Did my life collapse? Do the people that love me any less? No. And I also think, with the sacrifice thing, she also brought this point up, is that, something that I was very deeply ingrained with growing up is you sacrifice for the people that you love, which, given the right boundaries, is okay.
Yeah.
But if you don't have those healthy boundaries in place and you just keep on sacrificing and sacrificing, whether it's with the people that you love or whether it's with your job and your health, it's not sustainable. So those boundaries are needed in order to be able to healthily sacrifice. Or at that point, it's not even really sacrificing. It's just being in a healthy dynamic and giving love.
And there might be times where like, I think of like big life events that can happen where, maybe you have to move for someone else, or maybe like there are big things where like,
yes,
it really might have, this is because I've been watching 90 Day Fiance. I'll admit it right now. I'll admit it. But there are times where it might feel like sacrifice, but I feel like we all can watch a conversation and see whether the dynamic is someone having to put someone else above this other person consistently, or it's an open dynamic of trust. I think you could watch a couple conversations and know what that dynamic looks like between two people. And That's because there's less resistance to the ask when it's like a cycle. Like when you are in a dynamic where both people are getting their needs met, then there isn't a challenge upon someone needing something, because that person is getting their needs met, so they are able to fill your cup too.
Right.
And that's kind of like the beauty that can come from successful boundaries, is both people get to be seen and valued, but in the ways that matter to them. They get to define what that is. And it's almost like completely derailing like the narrative of like the 90s and a lot of different things where it was like, they should just know. If they love
Right.
you, then you'll know, or whatever it might
Right.
be. Like, no, if they love you, then they'll listen. That's
Right. And that in itself of they'll just know is very unfair. That puts a lot of pressure on the other person.
Yes.
Like they'll just know. No, I'm not a mind reader. They're not a mind reader. Like you have to be able to communicate. So I agree. There are some very old stigmas and things that we still see in movies today. And I'm just like,
Netflix commercials for Valentine's Day. Every we're gonna go like it's like, okay, we get it. We get it. Oh yes, done. Can we not again? But 100%, like it's the same kind of things, and I think that's why it matters to know like they can be successful. So let's jump in. When is a time where you did protect the boundary, and what did that result look like?
I went with a really generalized. Now anytime that I hold a boundary, it's for a reason.
Oh,
And even if it ends with me not getting the result that I want, like that person not respecting my boundary, then I'm like, okay, then I know who you are. If I still have to interact with you, I'm thinking specifics with works right now.
mhm.
I've set a boundary of this is what I expect, communication wise. This is what I expect with work-life balance. And if that person can't respect that, then I go, okay, I know who you are. I know that my expectations when we communicate can't be very high because you're not willing to see where my boundaries are and respect that. So I'm going to limit as much interaction as I can with you and still find a way that I can fulfill my own boundaries. Even if you're not giving me that approval, I'm still going to find a way to respect my work-life balance or, still communicate with you, but communicate in a way that feels comfortable for me. That's not anxiety provoking.
Well, and I'm going to prioritize myself in those
Right.
engagements. Like I'm no longer
Exactly.
going to be sitting there trying to figure out. I'm going to just prioritize myself in those engagements now.
Because what happens is when you've started that healing process and you have learned to clearly speak on your boundaries, which is hard, it is a learning process, especially like learning how to, I'm just going to say dictates, not the
Word
word
it.
that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And somebody still goes, no, but not even in like a respectful way, just no, doesn't matter to me. Then you're like, what? But what?
Hey.
The thing that I'm asking of you isn't a big thing. So it is kind of jarring.
Especially
Yes.
when it's like, no, this is
This is kind of basic.
like, what's going on? Like, absolutely. Especially then, it's even more annoying.
Right. So it's jarring. And I think, the normal reaction is to be frustrated and to go, but why? Why aren't you, respecting the thing that I'm asking? And you don't even have to do that.
No,
You just prioritize you.
literally.
What about you, Liddy?
For me, I think I struggle to believe that like boundaries were different than conflict for a very long time.
Ah,
It's
yes.
definitely like a line that I couldn't distinguish from. And like I talked about earlier in the ep, I think like it really does come down to like, are you directing the topic to be about yourself and your needs, or is it about giving someone else feedback in this moment? Because they're not going to take that as a boundary. And like when I see that shift is with me and my husband, like Brian and I, at this point in our dynamic, because we've learned how to put boundaries in place with each other, I have never like been blessed to have a home where I feel as like at peace and just like calm and asserting my own needs without like any, I just know like it will just happen. Like there will be really no thing.
Pushback.
Yeah. Like, and I think he knows the same with me. And even if we're mad at each other now, or like frustrated, like the way this goes down is just so different. And like things that would be so hard and I think are hard for a lot of couples. Like, I mean, we've been together 12 years. Oh my God, this April. And like, yeah, eventually you might fight about money or sex or a bunch of other stuff, chores, where the forks go. Like, you don't know exactly what, but there's going to be conflict in a relationship that's lasting hopefully your whole life, right? Like and so for us, boundaries have just made having these conversations safe. We've discussed what we need to have a productive conversation, and now we actually get results from the conversations. We actually make plans and feel like, hey, this person wants the best for me. And it's like, that's what you want to feel when you're making a home. And I even like made a silly example of it because it just like stood out to me. It's like, yeah, exactly. Like this is just so different, which was today. We were supposed to go for a beach walk. And, Brian ended up making some plans to play golf with a friend. And he has communicated to me how important developing his skill with this hobby is. I've communicated to him how important doing a beach walk once a week with him is to me. And so when this happened, like I initially felt some frustration right at the jump about to assert the boundary. And he said, so I was thinking maybe one day this week we wake up early in the morning and we just head over to the beach and we do a walk before either of us starts work. And I said, perfect. Because we'd already had boundaries in place. So he understood when the plans changed that it would be important to meet me at my boundary as well.
Right.
And so in the past, that could have derailed the whole weekend, right? What? You forgot or this or that, whatever it might be. And so I think like if you're someone that is nervous about boundaries because you are thinking like, well, if I start telling people in my life, like, I don't like when you do this, I don't like, that's feedback. That's not a boundary. A boundary sounds like it really matters to me when we connect at the beach together because that's the kind of thing I've always dreamed about getting to do consistently. No one's going to be offended.
True. But I think that also the really important thing that you highlighted is one, that he recognized your boundary, but also two, in that moment where he said, let's later this week go for a beach walk. It's telling you like, hey, it's okay. I got you. Like
Hold on.
I saw you. I know that this is important to you. I know that this may feel like a little hurtful right now or whatever adjective you'd like to use, but I got you. I didn't forget about your
100%.
boundary.
100%. And in that moment, now something that could have potentially been a conflict or something negative, you actually feel seen. You actually feel valued. You're like, oh, look, even though this thing is important to him, he did not waver in like what he was thinking about with me. And I think like the more someone meets your boundaries, the more you're going to meet their boundaries. And then the more that snowballs, you are creating a bond that is not easy to deter from. And like, I think like we kind of said at the start of this app, like that is what we want. Like most of us are walking around desiring for the people in our life for us to get to feel authentic connection with.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do with our culture and society valuing things that distract you from connection.
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure. Absolutely. But I don't think that was a silly example, by the way. I think that was a great example. I don't think that was silly at all. I think it nailed it on the head.
Daily example, like, because I think that's where boundaries get lost in the sauce. I think like a lot of us might get comfortable, like if someone asks something that's just like kind of egregious, to be like, no, and like we'll hold that boundary. But I feel like it's in the daily nuances that our boundaries get lost in the sauce. And so that was why I was like, let's like really just, here's
Yeah,
daily snippet. So daily would be better than silly. Thank you for that.
of course. The reframe is always helpful.
Framing.
So, framing. Oh my gosh, framing. Yes, which also goes right around with boundaries. Um, but heading into our last question, how can holding your boundaries help you reach your goals?
And now is when I get to put that, all that passion I was discussing earlier. I'm ready. I'm ready. Let me tell you about one of my favorite concepts, energy dollars. Listen to me, humans. You are given, and I made this number up, it is arbitrary, do not come at me, 100 energy dollars a day. Okay. So just, I want you to imagine you get 100 energy dollars a day. You're doling them out. You're not setting any boundaries. Woo! You're just giving it all away.
Making it rain.
Making it rain energy. Comes 3 p.m. and you're like, I can't work out. I'm exhausted. Oh my God. I can't even think. You know what? I can't cook tonight either. I'm ordering some pizza. I'm done. And then that happens again and again and again and again. And you're wondering, what's wrong with me? And it's like, my love, nothing is wrong with you. You are overspending your energy dollars. That's what it comes down to. We're not robots. No matter how much capitalism would love us to just be able to keep chugging energy drinks to be like, I can be more productive. Like, you're not a robot. You're like a bag of flesh and water at best. Like, I don't know what to tell you. You have to protect your energy dollars. And so when I'm sitting down with clients who are struggling with this, we literally carve out like step by step, what are we going to start doing? And a great example that I love from one of my clients is that they just said, okay, I know that around 1 to 2 in the office, no one's around because everyone leaves for lunch at that time. I'm going to hop on my treadmill at that time if everybody else is gone. And so now, suddenly, someone who hasn't been able to get movement into their day is using an hour of time where they were watching Netflix episodes or scrolling on Instagram to numb, like Kelly was previously talking about, taking lunch, but not even eating during that time for the record. So it's like, it's about going, how can I protect my peace? How can I look at pieces of my day and say, I'm taking this energy back, I'm taking this energy back. And then allowing that to keep layering into the habits you now can fit into that time. But I just think people feel a lot of guilt when they go to start the process of this. And I think like the truth of the matter is everyone in your life will benefit from you having boundaries because there will be more of you to offer them.
Right.
What do you
Definitely.
think?
So I like the way that you worded that. I think I have like the same idea. I just worded it a little bit differently. So again, when you're holding your boundaries, like we've talked about in past episodes, you're keeping promises to yourself. So you're compiling that data of, okay, I kept this one promise and I'm going to keep on doing that. But the second that you break boundaries, the first time is the hardest. The first time you break that promise to yourself is the hardest. And then after that, it just gets easier and easier and easier to break those promises. So if you're breaking promises and you're not doing your exercise at lunchtime, or you are not making time for, taking care of yourself on your days off, then your brain compiles that and it starts to kind of play with your self-worth. And then it's kind of like that cycle again. But if you're building all these positive habits, like you were saying, you're building that self-confidence and going, yes, I am worth this. Yes, I'm going to continue to hold the boundaries because look how good I feel every time I do this. And by building confidence and keeping promises to yourself and continuing to build those positive habits, you're on a very healthy path.
100%. You just tied self-trust to the process in a way that I think like really kind of ties it all together. Like when you trust yourself, you're going to hold the boundaries and you're going to be consistent because they
Yeah.
are a habit, kind of like what you just said just like anything else. So if you fall out of the habit, it feels harder. And when you really focus on it and you build the habit, it'll be more consistent.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see.
So
Now.
I do. She's been here the whole time. She's being well behaved today for once.
I
Um,
do.
so I think that the very last thing that we kind of hit on a few times, but I just kind of want to
Yeah.
re-emphasize is that holding your boundaries isn't selfish.
Yeah. Let's just say it again for the people in the back. Absolutely. Say it again, man. Like I it is how you love yourself. And like, if you are sitting here questioning for a second if you deserve to give yourself that love, I am screaming to you through the void. You absolutely goddamn deserve to give yourself that amount of love. No question.
Yeah. Yeah. And so with that, I think that kind of wraps this episode. Thank you for listening. You can always find us on Instagram, or we will include our email in the show notes. If you have any ideas for future shows, we would love to hear from you.
Yes, please. We hope that we do hear from you guys. If you're looking to work with a health or wellness coach, that information is on both of our Instagram pages. And honestly, go set a boundary today. Go do it for the health of it.
For the health of it. We'll see you next time.
Bye.